Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be exploring one of history's most dramatic transformations.
Okay.
Saul's conversion on the road to Damascus.
Right.
We've got Acts 9.1 through 9.
Okay.
And a sermon based on this passage as our guides.
Interesting.
And believe me, this story is anything but a Sunday school lesson.
Okay.
We're talking about a guy who walked over 230 kilometers.
Wow.
That's like hiking from New York City to Boston.
Oh, wow.
Just to arrest early Christians.
Yeah.
Imagine the dedication or maybe even the stubbornness that would take.
Yeah.
And get this, the spot where he encountered Jesus is marked by a church to this day.
Really?
It's like a real-life X marks the spot on a treasure map of faith.
What's fascinating about this story is that it's not just about a historical event.
Right.
It speaks to the power of transformation.
Yeah.
The challenges of understanding different perspectives and the possibility of second chances, things we all grapple with, even today.
Okay, so let's rewind to the beginning.
Okay.
Saul wasn't out for a leisurely stroll to Damascus.
Right.
He was on a mission to arrest followers of the way, as early Christians were called. And that 230-kilometer journey, it wasn't exactly a walk in the park back then. I mean, no GPS, no rest stops. Maybe a few grumpy camels. It really highlights how far Saul was willing to go to uphold his beliefs.
His commitment was undeniable. He genuinely believed he was doing the right thing, defending the purity of his faith. This makes his sudden shift all the more powerful.
So imagine you're Saul walking along this dusty road, totally convinced you're right, and then, bam, a blinding light.
Whoa.
A voice calls your name.
Wow.
And suddenly you can't see.
Oh my God.
It's like something out of a movie. A total sensory overload.
Similar experiences have been reported throughout history.
Right.
And across many cultures and faiths. Visions, voices, altered states of consciousness. They raise big questions about the nature of reality. The power of belief.
Right.
And how we make sense of these unexplainable encounters.
It makes you wonder, what would it take to shake up your worldview that dramatically? Before we get too introspective, let's figure out why Saul was so set on persecuting Christians in the first place. It wasn't personal, right?
Not at all.
Okay.
It was deeply theological.
Okay.
As a devout Jew and a Pharisee.
Right.
Saul believed Christians were committing blasphemy by calling Jesus the Son of God. To understand why this was such a big deal, we need to consider the Jewish context of the time.
Right.
The idea of God having a son challenged fundamental beliefs about God's oneness and singularity.
That makes sense.
So
when the voice identifies itself as Jesus, it must have been like the ultimate plot twist for Saul. Wow. And the way Jesus identifies himself with the phrase ego eimi, meaning I am, would have had huge significance for Saul.
Right.
It directly echoes God's words to Moses in the Old Testament. I am, W-H-O-I-M.
Right.
Saul, a scholar of Scripture, would have recognized this instantly. It's like Jesus was claiming a direct connection to God, using the very words God used to reveal himself.
Wow. Talk about a powerful statement.
It's
like the foundation of everything Saul believed in just crumbled beneath him.
Right.
And then there's the 3 days of blindness. What's the deeper meaning there?
Think of it like this.
Okay.
Those 3 days parallel Jesus' 3 days in the tomb.
Okay.
They symbolize death. In Saul's case, the death of his old self.
His
previous understanding of the world.
Right.
It's a period of darkness and disorientation, but also a necessary step towards rebirth. A transformation into a new life.
So Saul's been knocked off his high horse.
Blinded by this encounter. And he's essentially forced to confront everything he thought he knew, what happens next. The sermon we're looking at delves into some really interesting territory here.
It explores this powerful idea that harming the church is the same as harming Jesus himself.
Wait, how does that work?
The sermon uses the analogy of the church as the body of Christ. Just like injuring a part of your body harms the whole. Persecuting members of the church is equivalent to persecuting Jesus.
Oh, I see.
It's a powerful image that connects every believer directly to Jesus.
I see. So when Saul was going after Christians, he was essentially attacking Jesus himself.
Exactly.
That's a pretty profound realization, especially for someone who saw himself as defending God.
And this leads to the sermon's message.
Okay.
About loving and caring for the church, even with all its flaws.
Yeah.
We're called to embrace that imperfection.
Right.
And see the value in each member, just as Christ loves us.
Yeah.
Despite our shortcomings.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it, no church is perfect. There are always going to be disagreements and human failings.
Yeah.
But the idea is to work towards unity and growth despite those imperfections.
Precisely. Yeah. It's about embodying Christ's love through service.
Yeah.
Compassion and understanding.
Yeah.
It's about supporting and caring for one another within the community of believers.
Right.
Just as we would care for our own bodies.
So we have Saul blinded and forced to rethink everything he believed in. But then we also see this incredible act of patience and forgiveness from God.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy was actively trying to destroy the early church.
Right.
He probably deserved some serious consequences, right?
He did.
Yet he receives grace instead.
It really raises the question.
Yeah.
If God, with infinite wisdom and justice, can offer such forgiveness to Saul, how much more should we try to forgive those who have wronged us?
Right.
It's a challenge
to
examine our own capacity for forgiveness and choose love over judgment.
It reminds me of the parable of the prodigal son.
Oh, yeah.
No matter how far we stray, there's always a way back, a chance for a new beginning.
Exactly.
It's about recognizing that everyone deserves compassion, even those who seem to be our enemies.
Exactly.
Right.
And this forgiveness isn't just about the other person.
Right.
It's about freeing ourselves from anger and resentment.
Yeah.
It's a path towards inner peace and healing.
So we've got this dramatic encounter,
right?
The symbolism of blindness and rebirth, and this message of forgiveness and love.
Yeah.
Where does the sermon go from here?
It encourages us to connect Saul's transformation to our own lives.
Okay.
It asks us to examine our own deeply held beliefs and actions. Are there areas in our lives where we need to die to self, to let go of old patterns and embrace change?
That's a powerful challenge.
It is.
It's so easy to get comfortable in our own worldviews.
Yeah.
Surrounded by people who agree with us.
Right.
But maybe there's something to be said for stepping outside that comfort zone, for questioning our assumptions, and being open to different perspectives. Maybe that's where real growth happens.
And that willingness to challenge ourselves, to be open to the possibility that we might be wrong, is precisely where understanding and transformation begin.
Yeah.
Saul's story reminds us that change is possible for anyone, even the most ardent opponent.
You know, it's easy to talk about changing our beliefs and being open to new ideas.
Right.
But what does that actually look like? What happened to Saul after those 3 days of blindness?
Yeah.
How did he go from being this hardcore opponent of Christianity to becoming, well, the Apostle Paul?
That's where we see the real work of transformation begin.
Okay.
According to Acts, a disciple named Ananias is instructed by God to find Saul.
Okay.
Now, put yourself in Ananias' shoes.
Okay.
You've heard stories about this Saul guy who's been rounding up Christians.
All right.
And now God's telling you to go meet him.
I don't know about you.
Yeah.
But I'd probably be checking the caller ID on that one.
Right.
But Ananias goes trusting in God's plan. And he finds Saul still blind and reeling from his experience.
And it's in this moment that we witness the tangible effects of grace.
Wow.
Ananias lays his hands on Saul. His sight is restored, and he is filled with the Holy Spirit.
Wow.
It's a powerful moment of healing and transformation.
It makes you wonder what was going through Saul's mind at that moment.
Yeah.
Talk about a life-altering experience.
It is.
But what about all those deeply held beliefs that he'd been so passionate about? How did he reconcile those with this newfound understanding of Jesus?
That's where the real journey begins.
Okay.
Instead of shying away from the very people he had persecuted, Paul spends time in Damascus, learning from them and immersing himself in the teachings of Jesus.
Right.
He delves into the scriptures, re-examining them through this new lens of faith.
So it wasn't just a sudden flip of a switch. It was a process.
Yeah.
A wrestling match between his old ideas and these radical new ones.
Exactly. And this process of self-reflection, of questioning and reevaluating is something the sermon really emphasizes.
Right.
It challenges us to look at our own lives.
Yeah.
What are those things we hold to be absolutely true?
Yeah.
Are we willing to question them? Even if it means facing some discomfort or uncertainty.
It's funny because we often think of faith as being about certainty,
right?
About having all the answers. But this story suggests that maybe doubt and questioning are just as important.
Yes.
That maybe wrestling with our beliefs can actually lead us closer to truth.
Absolutely.
Wow.
That openness, that willingness to challenge our assumptions is where true growth and understanding take root.
Yeah.
Paul's story reminds us that transformation isn't just possible.
Right.
It can lead to something incredible.
So we've talked about this dramatic conversion, the theological implications, and the message of forgiveness and self-reflection.
Right.
But let's not forget that Saul, now Paul goes on to become a major figure in the early church.
He does.
He doesn't just passively accept his newfound faith.
Right.
He becomes this dynamic force for spreading the gospel.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
The story doesn't end with Paul's conversion.
Right.
This is where things get really exciting.
Yeah.
Paul travels all over the Roman Empire.
Wow.
Sharing the teachings of Jesus, establishing churches,
right,
and writing letters that become foundational texts for Christianity.
Talk about a career change.
I know, right?
From arresting Christians to leading them.
Yeah.
The sermon actually highlights this.
It does.
Emphasizing that love isn't just a feeling. It's about action.
Right.
About service.
Yeah.
And Paul definitely embodies that.
You can really see that dedication in his tireless efforts, his willingness to face persecution and hardship for the sake of spreading the gospel.
Yeah.
He truly lived out the message of love and sacrifice that Jesus taught.
And think about his writings.
Yeah.
They're still studied and debated today, centuries later.
It's amazing.
Romans, Corinthians, Galatians. These letters are packed with theological depth and practical guidance for living a Christian life.
Yeah.
They've shaped Christian thought and practice for generations.
His impact is undeniable.
Yeah.
He took complex theological concepts and made them accessible to a wide audience.
Right.
His writings addressed issues of faith, morality, community, and the very real challenges of living as a Christian in a world that wasn't always welcoming.
It's amazing to think about how this one man's journey, this radical transformation, had such a ripple effect throughout history, shaping the lives of millions of people.
It really speaks to the power of one life, the potential for change, and the incredible impact that faith can have.
So we've seen this transformation, this incredible shift in perspective, and now this amazing legacy that continues to influence people around the world.
But there's still one crucial question we haven't fully explored.
Okay.
What specific lessons can we, the listeners, take away from all of this? How can we apply this ancient story to our modern lives?
That's a great question.
It is.
And luckily for us, the sermon offers some insights. So we've journeyed with Saul as he transforms into Paul, witnessing his dramatic encounter with Jesus, the shift in his worldview, and the incredible impact he had on the early church. It's a story filled with twists and turns, but ultimately, it offers a powerful message of transformation, forgiveness, and love.
It really does.
Yeah.
And the sermon we've been discussing takes this ancient story and makes it relevant to our lives today.
Yeah.
It challenges us to look inward, to examine our own beliefs, and to consider the areas where we might need to die to self, to let go of old patterns and embrace change.
That phrase, die to self, always makes me think of those cheesy motivational posters. But when you really think about it, it's a profound concept.
It is.
It's about recognizing that sometimes we need to let go of our ego or need to be right and be open to something bigger than ourselves.
Exactly. It's about recognizing our own imperfections, our limitations, and surrendering to a power greater than ourselves. It's not about self-hatred or denying who we are. It's about humility. About recognizing that we don't have all the answers. And in that surrender, in that willingness to let go, we open ourselves to transformation and growth.
So how does that translate into everyday life?
Yeah.
What does it actually look like to die to self?
The sermon offers some practical examples.
Okay.
It talks about putting the needs of others before our own.
Right.
About choosing forgiveness over resentment. About actively seeking understanding rather than clinging to our own perspectives.
Yeah.
It's about letting go of that need to control everything.
Okay.
And trusting in something larger than ourselves.
It makes me think about those times when I've been so focused on my own problems, my own point of view, that I completely miss what's going on around me. It's like I'm wearing blinders, just like Saul on that road to Damascus.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
It's about taking off those blinders, opening our eyes to the needs of others, and recognizing that our own experiences are just a small part of a much larger tapestry.
So we have this powerful message of transformation and the challenge to die to self.
Right.
But what about forgiveness?
Yeah.
Saul was offered incredible grace.
He was.
Despite his actions. How can we apply that concept to our own lives?
Forgiveness is such a difficult concept, both giving and receiving it.
Yeah.
It's easy to say we forgive someone,
right?
But to truly let go of resentment, anger, and the desire for revenge, that's a whole other level.
Yeah.
But just like Saul was offered a second chance, we too can choose to offer that same grace to others.
Right.
And even to ourselves.
You know, it's interesting because we often think of forgiveness as something we do for other people. But maybe it's just as important to forgive ourselves for our own mistakes, our own shortcomings.
Right.
Maybe that's part of dying to self.
It could be.
Letting go of that self-criticism and allowing ourselves to move forward.
That's a really insightful point.
Yeah.
Holding on to guilt and shame.
Right.
Only keeps us trapped in the past. Forgiving ourselves, acknowledging our mistakes, but not letting them define us, is essential for growth and transformation.
It's like we're offering ourselves that same grace that God offered to Saul.
Right.
It's a reminder that we're all works in progress, that we all make mistakes, and that doesn't disqualify us from love, forgiveness, and second chances.
It really is about recognizing our shared humanity, our shared need for grace and compassion.
Right.
And in extending that grace to ourselves and others, we create space for healing, growth, and deeper connections.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we've journeyed from Saul the persecutor to Paul the apostle.
Right.
Uncovered layers of meaning. And explored the challenges of transformation, forgiveness, and love.
It's been a wild ride.
It has.
And hopefully you've gained some new insights into this ancient story and its relevance to your life today.
Right.
Remember, it's not just about the historical events. It's about the enduring power of transformation, the boundless nature of forgiveness, and the challenge to die to self, so that something new and beautiful can emerge.
We encourage you to keep exploring this story, to delve into Paul's writings and to see how his experiences and teachings might resonate with your own journey.
Absolutely.
And as always, keep diving deep into the things that matter.